platform strategy, as we know, has been the hotbed of private equity investors, and more so in the healthcare sector, a sector that has seen a lot of private equity interest in the last few years. Now, while this strategy was known to be prominent in the Western markets, we have gradually seen a prominence of the strategy playing out in the Indian market as well. So, what are the factors that have encouraged investors to take up this strategy in India, and how have the dynamics played out? Vishal, we could start with you.
So, firstly, thank you very much, Siddhant, for the invite. It's always a pleasure to be here. So, just to give you the landscape here in terms of the platform play, right? And so while we at AHH are running the single specialty healthcare platform, which is now probably the largest single specialty play in the country, but more importantly, I think the concept of the platform play has been there for some time. I remember one of the Indian funds had tried to put together a platform by having all minority investments in healthcare sitting in one ecosystem, which obviously had its own challenges, because when founders are sitting as majority investors on a platform, they seldom sort of engage on similar issues. So I think the bigger opportunity that fundamentally that players like us saw was that there is enough capital out there. Is there enough operating expertise to back that capital? Right? And that's why in the world of private equity, in the world of venture capital, we end up supporting one company at a time. But when you fundamentally believe that you have enough operating expertise sitting at the platform level, you have the opportunity to invest behind multiple companies at the same time. Particularly when you're also taking majority control of these companies, because then their future is also your future. So I think more and more as one thinks about it, it's a question of what are these platforms? What do they bring to the fore? Some of the platforms end up just being investing platforms. Some are platforms which are put together fundamentally because they are companies of a similar sector. But the last one, which I think for me is most important, is that can you be an operating and an investing platform? Because then you are taking the future trajectory of these companies in your own hands, and probably also giving your investors the right returns.
Swati, since you have been on the advisory side, you oversee a lot of transactions. What are your observations about this?
So, like Vishal rightly pointed out, there is capital available, and I do believe that what is playing out in the Indian healthcare ecosystem is that if you pick up any subsegment, it is quite underpenetrated from an organized perspective. Increasingly, patients want to walk into a much better setup which has a brand attached to it, because that gives them the comfort that we'll get the right treatment. Plus, promoters on the other side have seen some success stories, some piloted by Vishal himself, and they are also getting open to the idea of partnering with a larger brand, with an umbrella brand, and seeing the merits of being on a platform. What they bring, they definitely help to uplift, say, the compliance standards, uplift the equipments which are sourced. So they do see a lot of those synergies play out, and hence are now more open to be at the platform level, vis-a-vis being very promoter driven and at a regional level.
Shravan?
So on the medical equipment side, we are beneficiaries, downstream beneficiaries of the good work done by the likes of Vishal or Sanjay Arora or Gautam Khanna. As they grow in the service provider side, we are sort of a lagging indicator, if you will, right? Because as healthcare grows, as demand increases, and also in the previous session we spoke about tier 2, tier 3. So we see a significant expansion of healthcare demand, healthcare consumption. And also it's cleared, it's now segmented. It's not that everybody is buying the same equipment. You're looking at different categories of equipment. Someone asked a question earlier also about TAM. Finally, we're starting to see critical mass of TAM in medical equipment in the country itself, where it is worthwhile to consider a platform strategy. But it's still early days. Medical equipment does not have the maturity or the innovation or the reach that, say, the pharmaceutical sector has enjoyed for a couple of decades, or the healthcare services sector, single specialty or multi-specialty, have enjoyed. So it's early days, we're observing. We see pockets of innovation, we see pockets of manufacturing expertise. We do see a lot of distribution reach. In some segments of medical equipment and medical devices, we've seen a good export market as well. So, but if you want to put that all together, it's not as neat or organized as you would think, right? So we still need to identify those diamonds in the rough and pull them together. Also, as I think Amira put it very nicely, although you have the backing of private equity, it's not all about acquisitions, right? It's not just about M&A. We have to ensure that there is enough space for organic growth of the entity by itself, and then think of suitable tuck-in opportunities as well.
Swati, next question to you. Now, moving on from this, what are the kind of what is the kind of difference that you've seen when it comes to due diligence during such strategy at play, given the fact that identification of targets requires a lot of thought, and usually they are done for those who have a good management structure in place. So how different is the due diligence process for these kind of acquisitions?
So due diligence process is no different, Siddhant, whether you're looking at one singular asset or you're looking at a lot of tuck-in acquisitions under a platform play. I think the due diligence standards have gone way above in the last decade or so. Maybe a decade back, everyone was just doing a financial due diligence and a legal. Now, there are a lot of ESG agencies which have come up and who help in the ESG diligence. There is business integrity diligence which is also required, because you may be a large player in a region, but what is the color of capital which has really backed you? That is very, very important for global and marquee investors to look at when they are infusing into a company. So I don't think the color of DD changes between a single asset or a platform play. Maybe it's more stringent in a platform play because they have to also be mindful of the fact that they may have 15 such companies which are coming together. So do they really integrate well at the platform level or not?
Nishan? So moving on from that, while this has been a very new concept in India, but we still see that mostly it's the international investors and international PE firms who have pioneered this strategy. So what is the reason that domestic firms have not been able to pick up? And second, what is the kind of change that you think will enable them to pick up this strategy as well going forward?
Yeah, so Siddhant, I think what happens is it's the ability to put capital and the quantum of capital that you can put. Right? And obviously the international funds have very deep pockets to keep on putting capital behind a certain thesis, behind a certain theme. And that's why we find that funds like TPG and now GIC are putting so much of capital behind platforms like AHH. So I think it's a question of deep-rooted capital availability. I don't think there is an issue here of an international investor or an Indian investor. I think what happens is that once the themes pick up, we have seen in the healthcare sector, so much has evolved, so much has changed, from the multi-specialty hospitals to diagnostics to single specialties, and now to the platform play. There is a constant phase of evolution and innovation which is happening in terms of the way businesses have to be funded and grown. So I don't think it's a question of Indian or international. I think it's a question of somebody taking that leap of faith behind a certain strategy, proving it out, and then everybody else will follow it, right? Because capital goes where returns are. And truly, I think until unless, whether you are a single enterprise, you are whatever structure you may have, at the end of the day, you need to show to your investors that you can also exit those enterprises and make enough and more returns for them.
Next question also to you, and after that I would want Shravan to weigh in on this as well. Do you see the strategy being prominent only among the private equity investors, or do you see other types of investment funds also adopting the strategy going ahead?
No, so I think, again, when you put together a platform, you put together reasonable size, right? So, and let me give you a little bit of an idea in terms of where we started at AHH. So, when we started AHH, my first investment was of a single cancer clinic in a city called Hyderabad, which was in this company called AOI, which ended up becoming the second largest oncology chain of hospitals in the country. Post that, it was Motherhood Hospitals. Post that, it was Nova. Nova currently is 100 centers, IVF centers across 70 cities in the country. So it's a question of more the confidence that investors get behind what you are doing behind your enterprises. So I think it's not a question of whether there is private equity or there is venture capital or there are family offices. I think once a certain stage gets crossed and a certain size gets crossed, again, it's the ability to put incremental capital. So, you know, at AHH, we've now put in close to $300 million to work behind a team which was not existent about 7-8 years back. So, but some investors have the confidence to go and put in. So, I think it's a question of that. And whoever then has the capital will go and keep putting it behind these enterprises.
I think it's a similar theme here, and once again, it's going to be driven by demand, it's going to be driven by consumption. Platform as a concept is not new in the medical equipment space either. We have seen some very successful integrations, and we've seen some older companies that have expanded through a platform play by identifying adjacencies where they could increase their reach within the Indian market and also export, like say a Polymedicure. Legacy company, but it has been reinventing and innovating every couple of years and building on a platform strategy, but as an individual entity. Of course, it's a listed company. We've seen the great work done by Healthium in the medical consumable space, and they've created a lot of momentum there as well. Everlife. So there are a lot of these examples where we've seen success in bringing similar assets together, whether they're expanding by geography or expanding by segment or by product category. We've seen in the last, just pre-COVID, we've seen a lot of impetus in medical equipment. The government has been pushing for a lot of policy that is pro-localization, pro-innovation, which has helped the medical equipment market. But we still remain an 80% import-dependent market for medical equipment in India. We are very much net importers, although we have a fairly brisk export market as well. Having said that, the export market is slightly lower in terms of technology and innovation, and that is probably the space where we want to see more growth and more action, and I suspect that's also where the investment would come in, because now we have the critical mass of a domestic market which can accommodate a good amount of innovation and distribution heft, and through that we could explore the export market, and also as part of the platform play. We are not necessarily restricted by one segment or one geography. That's a benefit of having a fairly open-ended mandate.
Right. Now, throughout the day, even in earlier panels, we have seen a lot of focus on being regionally strong versus being nationally strong or weak. So that was also a conversation in one of the previous panels. Now, we know that in a country as big and diverse as India, a lot of chains, a lot of brand names that are strong in certain pockets, but may not be big players in other regions. So when the question of creation of a platform is concerned and bringing these different brands into one platform, what are the kind of challenges that you're likely to face given the difference in mindset, leadership, management structures? Vishal, you could start.
Yeah, so I think, as I said, that the most important factor depends again in terms of the size and the scale of the companies that you're bringing onto the platform. Obviously, when you're bringing them at a very young stage, where they're just at a very, very early stage, and you see a potential to make them grow, you obviously then also take the right shareholding structure in mind, right? Because a strategic platform is not quasi-investment platform alone, correct? And that's the biggest difference. Otherwise, venture capital will go and put in early stage dollars, then private equity will come in, the growth investors will come in, they will put incremental dollars behind an initial enterprise. And by the time the buyout funds come in, the enterprise has got enough scale and profitability behind it. But very importantly, when you take a look at many of these platform companies, they have been brought to the platform at a very young stage and a young age. So they have to prove their unit economics, they have to prove their scale. I think that is what is important. It's important in terms of, are you leading by shareholding? That means you have majority control of that company, and then you are putting enough capital behind it, you're putting the management teams behind it. I find so many times, and in fact it's happened in all the companies that we have taken till now, there was no management team. Right? They were founders and they were running their enterprise. And beyond a point, there was nobody else. So we had to put in an entire management team in each one of these companies. So that's the starting point. And you then take ownership of even putting up that management team. So I think the bigger question, frankly, is at what stage and scale you are getting these enterprises to come into the platform. The other thing which is important is that when you are doing the platform play, everybody has to play executive responsibilities. So it's not like you're sitting on a board, your advisors and the companies are just running their day-to-day work. Again, I'm sorry for the bias, but I'll just keep on giving examples from AHH because that's easier for everybody to understand. So at the AHH level today, I have just 5 people. I have my group CFO, I'm the head of business development, I have my head of HR, I'm a head of supply chain, head of projects, and head of IT. And they play executive functions in each one of the companies. So, for a very early stage company, it's impossible to get that talent because that talent is expensive, that talent costs a lot of resources. But when you have a platform play, you hedge that talent across multiple enterprises, but they play executive functions, they don't play advisory functions. And that's a theme that then plays out well because everybody is an executioner and nobody is an advisor. And they take responsibility for the results that they create in each one of their functions. And that's how truly a platform becomes scalable, sustainable, and also profitable. Because then everybody's mission is the same. It's not like there is a group of people who are just putting capital and nothing else. But you're putting capital and then also you're taking operating responsibilities.
Swati, having advised so many transactions, what is your perspective any different?
Pretty much, resonate with what Vishal has said. Like you rightly put, there are different pockets. So perhaps India has some 600 pockets put together, and there are nuances of doing business regionally, and creating a platform play is easier said than done. We have someone who's done it. So I think there is a fair balance required between shareholding and operational freedom given to the promoter at the ground level. Ultimately, you are backing a promoter, you are backing a brand because they were able to do the right things and scale up and become very prominent in that region. So they really know how to do it vis-a-vis the way you look at it from outside in. So you need to give that operational freedom to them. Obviously, keeping the shareholding with you at the platform level, like Vishal said, and totally concur with that because we recently did the Newberg transaction. Even there, they have a central support team. So they have done like 26, 27 acquisitions in the last 6 years, and there is a very strong team at the helm, who are working with the top promoters, but who are liaising on a day-to-day level with all the different promoters who are at the regional level. So I think a fair mix of balance between operational freedom versus shareholding and having the right team to support you.
Shaman?
A bit of a similar story here because we do want to take advantage of potential synergies between the entities, and of course we're very familiar with the AHH story and building a model somewhat similar where at the platform level we are quite light, and we'll be relying very heavily on the entities that we acquire or work closely with. And similar to what Vishal was saying, it's probably a 20-80 proportion in terms of time spent on investment and M&A work versus direct operational rigor. So every member of our platform team, we have 5 people, they will be sitting actively with the the entities that we will be operating with, and then seeing where we can find areas to cooperate, collaborate, work together. On the cost saving side and efficiency side, I think it's relatively straightforward. But on the go-to-market side, it may not be as straightforward because the customer segment or the geography or the product category might be a little different. So while we will make every attempt to have products that are closely adjacent to each other in one particular entity, if it's going to be very significantly different, we may not try to force fit those products or those categories into the same vertical or within the same platform. So we might have to have a parallel entity, but to the extent possible, we'll try to consolidate.
And Clayborn, as we all know, recently announced the creation of a new MedTech platform. So what was the rationale behind that decision?
I think we've seen growth. There's been a lot of buzz, especially post-COVID. There's been a lot of buzz around medical equipment. We've seen, at least in the in vitro diagnostic space, for example, I've seen a lot of products that have localized and made diagnostic testing more accessible in some of the geographies that they may not have been as accessible in the past. Seen that in imaging also. Production-linked incentive has spawned a lot of manufacturing capacity in the imaging space, X-ray and above, including CT scan and PET CT and linear accelerators. So there are a lot of threads that are converging at this point, and we believe that at least for the next decade or so, there's going to be significant growth. I keep coming back to the local TAM because people think of India as a potential exporter, but until we have a strong local market that can accommodate innovation and distribution and production, we are not going to be as strong as we can be in exports. So this was the broad thesis coming into Clayborn for the medical technology platform. India has already been strong in consumables, in plastic molded goods, in disposables. If you look at, if you go to say Medica and Düsseldorf and look at the Indian pavilion, you see a lot of these companies that are doing so well in this space. Now we're moving up the value chain in terms of complexity, and again, whether it's through private sector or accelerators or government sponsored or academia, we're seeing several pockets of excellence. It could be in digital solutions, it could be in AI, it could be in product development, UI, UX. So a lot of these are coming together. They need a home, right? They need a place where they can exist or coexist, and the whole needs to be greater than the sum of the parts. And as a platform, we can offer that space for innovators to come in, for distributors to come in, for manufacturers to come in and create significant heft in that space.
Right. Swati, any key themes that you have identified when platform strategy is concerned?
Not really. I think platform play is getting rolled up in almost all sub-segments. So the way we kind of look at healthcare, it's multi-speciality, single speciality, which would include IVF, eye care, mother and child, so on and so forth, med products, diagnostics, and I think this platform theme is playing out in all of these sub-segments. So single speciality, there is obviously AHH. In many ways, what's happened with Dr. Agarwal is also a platform play where they've done almost 20 acquisitions every year. So it is bringing together a lot of this and a platform play. They are going for an IPO. On the multi-speciality side, there is a Samara platform, which is Maringo. In diagnostics, there is one which has already happened, and as we speak to a lot of investors, they are quite keen on spotting the right anchor asset and see how a platform play can be worked out over there. Med products, you've just heard Shravan speaks. Plus, there is this Murugappa Group and Premji Invest platform, who have done one acquisition, one is in a very advanced stage. So I think this is playing out largely in all sub-segments, and there is enough and more to do in the Indian healthcare space. So yeah.
A lot has been said about multi-speciality versus single speciality, and Vishal, your journey has been interesting because you have throughout been in the multi-specialty avenue, but right now AHS is known for its single specialty preference. So what has prompted this shift, and how have you seen, has your experience been in this?
Yeah, so Siddhanta, I've actually led the multi-specialty live for almost 2.5 decades. And so when I came back from Singapore and was re-looking at where to start all over again back here in India, that is when this entire thought process came, that when the demand-supply curve of healthcare in this country is so wide that something has to come and fill up this black hole, which is constantly getting created in terms of the lack of supply of healthcare. And no matter how many beds you keep adding, that hole is not really getting filled up. It's getting wider. So when you are putting together a multi-specialty institution, and I know there are a lot of leaders over here who have done the multi-specialty play in regions, nationally, how many multi-specialty hospitals from ground up can you really create in a year, in 2 years, in 3 years? From the time that you actually put the foundation stone of a 250, 300 bedded hospital, if you are doing it on a greenfield basis, to the time that that hospital breaks even, to the time that it actually starts producing 10, 15, 20% EBITDA margin, it's a clear 4-year journey. Sometimes even longer, depending on the markets in which you are. Now doing that at scale, in terms of adding 20, 30, 40 hospitals, is not an easy task. And that's why if you see most of the time on the multi-specialty side, there are very quick acquisitions, right? Because you soon realize that unless you acquire growth, you sort of plateau out, because that's all that you can do on the greenfield side. So that is the reason why I took on this entire equation of putting together the multi-specialty or the single specialty opportunity, because replicability, scalability, and last but not the least, of also getting the right return on capital employed. Because I think that's really very critical and important, because the single specialty institutions allow you to get ROCEs of 25, 30, 40%, which you don't ever see on the multi-specialty side. So capital efficiency on the single specialty side also is much higher. Plus you can add a lot of scale very quickly. So that's the reason why I was saying that when I look back in 7 years' time and 8 years' time from the time that we started all of this, I don't think that if we were to go down the path of the multi-specialty side, in 7 years' time we would have gone across 60 cities. We could have built 100 IVF boxes, 24 mother and child boxes. On the oncology side, we did 16 hospitals across multiple cities. So I think there is merit in terms of following this path, and not saying the multi-specialty institutions need to continue to grow in this country, because it's not all specialties that can come out from the large format multi-specialty institution onto the single specialty side. Both have to grow in tandem, both have to grow in parallel. It's all about filling that gap. And whatever can fill that gap faster with scale, I think those are models worth to follow.
Big thank you to all the three of you for such an insightful discussion. But now, since we're running short of time, we may have time for just a couple of questions. Humble request, please keep your questions short.
Vishal, this is just continuing on what you just said, the big whole, right? And whether it's single specialty or multi-specialty, platform play, tier 1, tier 2. The view from all three of you on healthcare skilling. You talk about star doctors. There is a bigger gap between, after the doctor, there's this whole ecosystem of paramedical staff or the support staff. Somehow, that's not getting the attention that it needs and it deserves. It's sort of completely getting isolated. We're not talking about the top, but this 90% of the staff that actually makes the star doctors or makes the hospitals what it is the paramedical staff and the support staff. Why is there no impetus or momentum around trying to do something more about the healthcare skilling gap that is there in our country?
No, good question, Dr. Sanjay. I think number one, we heard everybody talking about the star doctors. I take a little bit of a contra view because ultimately stars get created from great enterprises. Otherwise, if all of us are chasing the same stars, then the sky is very small. And we can't grow healthcare enterprises. I think what has really happened on the nursing side, on the paramedical side, is that for a very long period of time, we didn't do anything about changing the regulatory environment around education. And that is also true on the clinical side, right? We followed the same norms for so many decades. And we never really looked at the opportunity of creating multiple new nursing colleges, medical colleges, paramedical colleges. And that's the reason why we are so starved of talent in this country. And I think one of the biggest problems around this black hole not getting filled up is fundamentally there is no talent. And talent is in such short supply. We were talking about tier 2 cities and tier 3 cities. Everybody from those cities, unless you create top class institutions, wants to gravitate towards the metros. And there is a handful of them. Staffing costs year on year today are increasing 29, 30, 35%. Fundamentally because there is such severe shortage. So margins are going to just keep on getting eroded unless we create massive amount of talent pools. And that's all left to, on the regulatory side to make sure that there is faster momentum. And many times, you see these announcements getting created, 300 colleges, 400 colleges. You just do a sense check in a couple of years out of what was announced and what actually got created is probably 1/10. So lots to do there. I think to me the fundamental principle of this is that we need to ease regulatory norms and push for paramedical education in this country. Create powerful diploma courses and give them equal footage, give them equal standing so that we create these alternate pools of education. I mean, like for example, the DNB program. The DNB program got created many years back on the medical education side to give you an impetus of parallel talent coming out on the private side. And today, some of the DNB doctors are the best in class. So I think that's the same thing that we need to follow. It's not necessary that nurses can only be doing BSc nurses, right? We had a very good GNM ecosystem, which suddenly evaporated. So rather than creating size and scale behind it, we just limited the entire supply chain of that pool of talent. So I think that's where the big problem is.
I think also if hospitals are incentivized to do so, either through regulatory norms or whether it's NABL, NABH mandating this, providing them with the digital tools, and a clear incentive to do so, or a disincentive not to do so. I think this remains one of the most significant underserved opportunities in healthcare today.
Thank you so much.
I'm really sorry if you have really running short of time.